What's up, Net Soldiers? I'm the Alliance and welcome back to another video. So today's video is going to be pretty interesting, mostly because we're going to be checking out Ranker's list on the 19 top best lightsaber fights in the entire Star Wars franchise. I've kind of glimpsed over it. I didn't look at every single one, but some of these don't really count as lightsaber fights. They count as more of like lightsaber interactions. Yeah, so see what I mean as we get further into the list. So if you want to see more of these videos, please want to like, subscribe, turn notifications. I also have a bunch of other videos that I have posted on my channel, so if you want to check out more videos from me, go check that out. Now with that said, let us begin. So we're going to be starting with number 19, and this is Kylo Ren versus Finn in The Force Awakens. So this fight is one of those ones when I first saw it, I didn't really even count it as a lightsaber fight because it really isn't. You know, this is just like a stormtrooper who had melee abilities versus a once Jedi who turned to the dark side, but isn't really a Sith, who has the ability to pretty much wreck anyone's day because he's been training for so long. I think when this fight first came out back in The Force Awakens, it actually really made me mad because I felt like it crapped on a lot of the stuff from the prequels that were established. But upon further viewings, I kind of accept it more because Kylo really did, you know, he was pretty injured. He was more injured than he was letting himself believe, and he thought that his hate was going to drive him. And as we saw, it really didn't help. And in fact, Finn almost outdid Kylo. So, and eventually you find out in like one of the novels that Finn did have melee training, as well as we found out later that he actually was force sensitive too. So I guess that's one of those, you know, perfect storm situations. And luckily Kylo was hurt because apparently Kylo would have wrecked Finn's day in seconds. So that's, I guess that makes sense. So I'm okay with this fight, but I understand if it is the worst because I think I'd probably put it the worst too. Just for me anyways. I guess we'll see how the rest of these go. Alright, moving on to our next one, we have Rey and Ren versus Snoke, The Last Jedi. So this really isn't a lightsaber fight like I mentioned in the beginning of this video. Like, this is one of those things where it's like, they're just kind of saying it is, but it's not actually a lightsaber fight. However, I guess this is cool. I always kind of like this scene. Besides the fact that Snoke was wasted, this scene is actually pretty cool, and it is kind of, in a way, subverting expectations, not done terribly, just kind of not done great either. So, I'd actually maybe put this behind, while I like this scene, I guess, more than Finn versus Kylo, it's not really a lightsaber fight, so I guess this is going to be behind. So this should actually be below Kylo. So, I don't know. Maybe that's just my thoughts. Next one we have Kylo Ren versus Rey. This is the force projecting fight. Here's the thing. The choreography of the sequel trilogies are pretty bad. We know that. But this scene, I think, might be my favorite out of The Rise of Skywalker. I just think it's an interesting fight. Sure, it doesn't really make a lot of sense, but this one compared to the one when they're fighting on the Death Star, I actually prefer this one. For while that one is more gritty, this one is just interesting. It's something we've never actually seen. And I like the idea of like what it represents, mostly because while I'm confused by it, I think it's still interesting that they actually went like full out and had like a force battle with lightsabers. It was just interesting. So I'm not 100% against it. I'm not 100% for it, but I think it was interesting for what it was. So I would actually put this above the other one in the fight. I'm gonna guess we'll probably see that other one at the Death Star later on in the video. Alright, next one we have number 16. This is Qui-Gon Jinn versus Darth Maul, The Phantom Menace. This is another lightsaber fight, but it's so short you can't really even count it as a real lightsaber fight. I do think it's cool though. I mean, I've never had a problem with his lightsaber fight. I always thought it was interesting to kind of see Maul using one lightsaber and seeing how Qui-Gon can kind of handle like that quick fight. Because Qui-Gon didn't go there expecting to have to fight like a Sith assassin, you know what I mean? So when he's just kind of like roaming, he's going his own way and he feels something in the Force, he's like, wait a second, turns around, there's this Darth Maul coming right for him and Anakin. He's like, Anakin, get down. He gets his lightsaber out. And it's really cool to see that because Qui-Gon was not ready for a lightsaber battle. You know, he was prepared, but he wasn't like ready. He was not expecting this. So that was really cool that they actually showed that. It really made his character, I mean, he was already a cool character, of course, up to that point in the movie, but this made him look like, you know, this is what a Jedi Master does. You know, they're just ready to battle when they need to. So that was really cool. Next one we have Kylo Ren versus Rey, The Force Awakens. So for me, Like I mentioned earlier about the Finn versus Kylo Ren fight, this fight has kind of grown on me as time has gone on. When this first came out, it really annoyed me, like I mentioned, because it kind of just threw away everything we knew about the prequel fights and what we know since the prequels were established so much different stuff when it comes to Jedi and the Force. And then Rey comes out of nowhere and kicks Kylo's butt. We eventually are given a canon reason because they are connected. So as powerful as Kylo gets, Rey will gain the same amount of power to meet that. So I think that's interesting that that's kind of what they are portraying. And while this ending fight would kind of break canon, The Last Jedi kind of fixes that a little bit. So if you want to, you know, regardless of how much you hate about The Last Jedi, in a way that kind of fixes this fight and the outcome. Then again, Kylo was also hurt, but Rey also, while she's trained with a quarterstaff, or I guess it wasn't really a quarterstaff, it was a full-on staff. Lightsabers and staffs are completely different things. So I've kind of grown to like this fight, but I'm not like, it's still definitely not in the top 10 lightsaber fights, you know what I mean? At least for me, it's good, but yeah, not top 10. Unless we're talking like, of course, if we're doing the final lightsaber fight type of stuff, of course in the top 10 because there's only 9. Technically, there's only 8 if you don't count The Last Jedi's lightsaber fight, because there really technically isn't one. I would put this one probably maybe around 6. You know, I don't know. Maybe I'll have to re-up my list. I did one like that a while ago where I ranked all of them. Now that The Rise of Skywalker is out, I might have to hit it again and see what I figure out. But yeah, it's fine, but it's not as good as some of the other ones we're going to see on this list, 100%. Okay, moving on to the next one, we have Obi-Wan Kenobi versus Darth Vader, A New Hope. So here's the thing about this. People are going to be mad about this. But my thought process on this is that while it is interesting, it is the first lightsaber fight. They didn't really know what they wanted to do with the lightsabers yet as far as the background of the movie and not really the lore. I'm okay with the fact that this is as low as it is because that means that future lightsaber fights were better. You see what I mean? And honestly, that's how it should be. You should always be trying to improve and evolve your story. And not just your story, but also the extra elements that go along with it. So, although this was the establishing lightsaber fight, the lightsaber fights that came after it were better. And that's how it should be. So I'm okay with it being as low as it is. So, yeah. Alright, moving on to the next one. This one is Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker versus Count Dooku in Attack of the Clones. I used to really dislike this fight, mostly because it felt kind of wasteful. But I've come to the conclusion that I actually do like this fight because while it doesn't really serve much as far as the movie narrative, it doesn't really serve much to the plot. What it does is it establishes Anakin and Obi-Wan's roles in the story. You know, it shows Anakin being rash and not being able to control himself. And that's exactly what happens. He gets wrecked. Obi-Wan, while he is, you know, a good defensive duelist, he still has flaws, and he learns that here. You know, he learns that he is not as good as he thinks he is. While Anakin thinks that he is, like, amazing, and he gets proved wrong, Kenobi knows he's good enough, but he needs to be better, and this is an example that shows him that. And of course, then Yoda shows up. I like the dynamic between Dooku and Yoda, because it shows two different warriors who know each other's skills and power levels, and it's just cool to kind of see them go at it and just test each other. It's almost like a game of chess. You know, they throw the Force abilities, they realize that's not working, and they try lightsaber fights, and Dooku's starting to kind of get beat a little bit, so he has to kind of cheat to get out of it. And I think it's interesting to kind of show that, because while we know Dooku as, he seems like he is an honorable, older, not a Jedi anymore, more like a Sith Lord now, of course, he is smart. So while you can say it was a dishonorable thing for him to do that, in the end of the day, he lived to see another day. So you have to kind of weigh the idea of honorable versus smart. You know, if it's a smart thing to be unhonorable, then you have to, you know, live, you know? And that's just kind of what he did. So I think overall, while I didn't like this fight in the past, it's pretty cool. And I like the fact that it's a little higher than all the other ones on this list. I don't know if I could necessarily put it like above A New Hope fight, mostly because the New Hope fight is just, it means a lot, especially if you come off the prequels, compared to this fight. But I do understand why it is above it, because there is more going on with it technically, so I'd understand that. Alright, moving on to our next one. We have number 12 is Kylo Ren versus Rey, The Rise of Skywalker. So this is the one I mentioned earlier. While this one has more going on as far as the scene. It feels more chaotic. I do prefer the Force fight, because although that one was shorter, there's just something about that one that's really interesting to me, at least. So I understand why this would be higher, because it is, you know, more action oriented. It is reminiscent of the prequels while also still being true to what the sequels have kind of evolved the lightsaber fight into. When I say evolve, I don't necessarily mean it's better. I just mean it's, you know, it's its own thing compared to the prequels and even the originals. So I think it's fine, but I can understand why it's here on this list. Moving on to the next one, we have Rey and Ren versus Snoke's guards. Okay, so this is considered different from the whole Snoke thing earlier. Not really a lightsaber fight technically, but technically yes, because they have lightsabers. I don't really know. I don't know how to really go about that. But I would say out of the entirety of Last Jedi, this scene is amazing. Sure, I know if you slow it down, it looks rough. I know that. Some of the people who were the stunt guys, they were kind of off their marks. Rey was off her mark. Even Kylo was off his mark. And at the end of the day, if you watch it in the way it's supposed to be, at the speed it's supposed to be, it looks actually pretty good. And I think that this scene is probably the best looking scene out of all of the Star Wars movies. And that's going a lot. You know, I always say this, while I'm not a massive fan of The Last Jedi, it is visually the best looking Star Wars out of all of them. And this scene shows that. Yes, it doesn't really make sense for him to be like, you know, Snoke to have like a throne room right in front of massive windows where he just gets shot out. But at the end of the day, that's one of those things with Star Wars you can kind of just forgive because, you know, whatever, who cares. Overall, good scene. I do understand it has flaws, but I like it. And I think it looks good. So hey, it is what it is. I like when Kylo and Rey are working together. They work together really well. Such a shame that they, you know, won't be able to work together ever again because of the end of Episode 9. But, you know, it is what it is. Okay, next one we have, number 10 is Mace Windu versus Chancellor Palpatine, Revenge of the Sith. This is another quick lightsaber fight, but it establishes just how powerful Palpatine is, I feel. And you never truly get to see his true power until this point in the universe. And he's taken on one of the strongest Jedi we've seen. And still to this day, there are fans who are debating both sides of whether Palpatine threw the fight or Mace actually won. I'm in the category that is kind of in between. I think that Palpatine initially was going to throw the fight, but then realized Mace was a lot more powerful than he was. And so while Palpatine was going to necessarily throw the fight to get Anakin's attention, he didn't actually think that Mace was going to overtake him as quick as he did. And I think while Palpatine threw the fight in the beginning, he tried to then defend himself, and then Mace was ready and kicked his butt. So that might be a grasping at straws type of thing. That might have just been my opinion, but I think that's pretty cool to think of that concept. So that's what I personally think. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Who do you think won that fight? I'd put a poll up here, but I guess YouTube got rid of those because they're boring. All right, next one we have Anakin and Obi-Wan versus Count Dooku, Revenge of the Sith. So this is the first fight of Revenge of the Sith, but also this is also kind of like part 2 of the fight in the end of Attack of the Clones. Like I mentioned about how Anakin was in the past, he was very rash. His decision making was very attack oriented, and Obi-Wan's was too defensive and thinking too much about his skill, not just kind of letting it flow. And this is the answer to that. You know, Anakin is much more confident in himself, much more powerful, much more better of a duelist, and Obi-Wan is a much more skilled defensive warrior. And of course, Dooku still technically breaks his block, but in the end of the day, Anakin finishes Dooku off. Now I know in the novelization of this movie, Dooku is supposed to kill Kenobi and then let Anakin capture him. I think that while Dooku didn't technically attempt to kill Anakin at first, when he realized just how powerful Anakin has become, I think he actually tried to then fight and then failed. So while you could say like, oh, Dooku wasn't really trying, in my opinion, I think that in the beginning, while he may not have been actually trying to kill them, he was by the end, and you can kind of see that on his face, and Anakin wins. So like I mentioned, while this is the first fight of Episode 3, it's also the second part of the final fight in episode 2. So I think it comes full circle, and I like that it is that way. It shows just how far Anakin has become as a Jedi, as well as the fall of Darth Tyrannus, you know? So, yeah, I like it. Moving on to the next one, we have Yoda versus Count Dooku Attack of the Clones. Okay, so I mentioned this earlier. I didn't know that this one was on the list. I already talked about this, so I don't know why it's this high. I think it's cool to see Yoda at full power, but I don't really think it's this good. I actually put the Anakin versus Dooku on Revenge of the Sith above this, but it's cool. I understand that people would like this. It's just, I couldn't put it above that. At least in my opinion. Moving on to the next one, we have Obi-Wan Kenobi versus General Grievous for Revenge of the Sith. So for me, I think this is pretty cool. I would have liked to see more lightsaber fight, because the lightsaber fight in this is very brief, but it's cool. I don't know why it's this high. I couldn't really put this above the Anakin and Kenobi versus Dooku, like I mentioned. I might not even be able to put this above Mace and Palpatine's fight, in my opinion, because this one it's good, but I actually prefer Mace and Palpatine, though. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Next one, Darth Vader versus Rebel Scum. Now, this is another non-lightsaber fight, but this scene saved Rogue One for me. Rogue One is decent. I can't say it's, like, good. It's fine, but I definitely know this scene made that film a lot better, so yeah. Okay, moving on to our next one, we have Yoda versus Emperor Palpatine, Revenge of the Sith. Yes, this is not only a very cool, like, example of the light versus the dark, like pure light versus pure dark. This is it's showing us the true power of both Palpatine and Yoda. These beings we've known since the original trilogy and how strong they are, and just kind of putting like the best of the best against each other. And I think that's what's so amazing about this fight. Yes, while it is kind of brief, especially if you consider it, you know, compared to Obi-Wan and Anakin's fight, it's still really good, so I can't complain about it. Next one, we have Luke and Vader on The Empire Strikes Back. I agree with this. This isn't exactly the most flashy fight, but what it represents is bigger, I think, than most other lightsaber fights in the entire series. Because what this represents is Luke coming face to face with Vader for the first time, finding out he's his father, and you can tell the entire time Vader's just testing Luke out. You know, Vader doesn't go with the attempt to kill Luke. You know what I mean? He's going to test him. And this was a big test for him, I think. So it was pretty good. Next one, Luke Skywalker versus Darth Vader, Return of the Jedi. This is where Luke defeats Vader, and then Palpatine tries to kill Luke once Luke doesn't destroy his father and doesn't take his place by his side. And Vader, of course, sacrifices himself. Well, I should say, Anakin sacrifices himself to save his son. This is an amazing finale to the saga. And I understand why a lot of people are really mad about the sequel trilogy existing, because this was an amazing final cap. You know, even when this was just a trilogy, before the prequels came out, it was an amazing cap. And with the prequels, it just makes this episode so much better, in my opinion. So I could see why people would put this one here. I might actually put the Empire Strikes Back fight above this one, but just barely. And that's just how I feel. But I understand why this is here. So yeah. Moving on to our second last one. Let's see. I already know what it's going to be. It's either going to be Duel of Fates, or it's going to be the Clash of Heroes. So either end of episode 1 lightsaber fight, or end of episode 3 lightsaber fight. Let's see what it is. So yeah, Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi versus Darth Maul on the Phantom Menace. So this is the final fight, the Duel of Fates. You know, it means a lot. This one scene is a lot deeper than I think people realize. They just think it's a big flashy lightsaber fight, but there's a lot of elements that go into it. Dave Filoni said it the best. You know, this fight scene establishes where these characters are going to be going. You know, this fight scene establishes Qui-Gon dying, which effectively means Anakin isn't going to have the master he's supposed to have, the person who can, you know, connect with him the most. He's going to get Obi-Wan, who's going to view as an older brother and kind of have a competitive edge next to him instead of looking to him like a father. And this is where, in a way, this is where like Vader is truly born. You know, at this point, once Qui-Gon dies, Vader has just been I shouldn't say born, but he is now being created. You know, the idea of him has been conceived. And it was this scene. So people can complain about it. They can say it's too flashy. They can say there's no drama. But I think they're crazy because just watch the scene. I don't really know how to explain that. Now, of course, number one, Anakin versus Obi-Wan, Revenge of the Sith. I have no doubt in my mind. I knew this was going to be, if it wasn't number one, it was definitely going to be number two. And it's number one. I don't really have to explain this scene. Just watch it. It's amazing. It is the final fight of heroes. It is the clash of heroes. On Obi-Wan's side, he has to win, you know. And Anakin wants to win too. And, of course, while Obi-Wan doesn't want to kill his best friend, he's got to do what he's got to do because Anakin's turned to the dark side. And it is an example of, you know, a lot of things, not only because it is an awesome lightsaber fight, but also the dynamics between the characters. You can kind of relate to them in a way. Well, you know, not 100% relatable, of course, but, you know, the dynamic of, like, losing a good friend of yours, someone you've been friends with for years, and then one day, you know, let's say they go to jail, or, you know, you find out that they were doing drugs or doing something bad, and, you know, you want to help them, but at the end of the day, you can't. They've already fallen into the darkness, or the evil in their heart, or, you know, just the badness in general. And I've lost a couple of friends, a specific friend I know, like in my head. I think of this sometimes, and I think that's another reason why this story is so dynamic. Because no matter how many times I tried to help him, I'm not going to say his name, but no matter how many times I tried to help him and be a good friend to him, and then the day his addiction got the better of him, and he unfortunately he passed away because of it. So that's one of those things where, like, I don't know, it's always just kind of stuck with me, and I 100% understand why this is number one, because it goes deeper than just a lightsaber duel. It's someone who you love and you're trying to save them, and you can't. No matter what you do, they're in charge themselves, and you know what happens. So yeah, I didn't mean to I didn't mean to make that so deep, but it is one of those things where, like, when you start thinking about it, you know, it does kind of hurt, because it makes you think, what else could you have done? But you can't, because it is what it is. But yeah, that's it for this video, guys. What do you think? Do you agree with this? Do you think that this list is perfect? Do you think it's off? Do you think that pieces are missing, or do you think that some things are in here that shouldn't be? Let me know in the comments below. If you want to see more videos from me, please remember to like and subscribe and turn notifications. And I guess that's it. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll catch you later. Peace.